Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome. I am Joanne Archie from the Corporate Communication Department of the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service. We have invited you here this afternoon to address a matter of public interest. With me this afternoon is, on my left, we have the Director of the Counter-Trafficking Unit, Dr. Samantha Chetram. Next to her, we have the Deputy Director, Ms. Kimoy Thomas Williams. We have Ms. Laura Ramcharita, the Senior Immigration Officer in charge of enforcement. Superintendent Guy Allen from the head, she is the head Special Victims Department. We also have Mr. Charles Peter Mitchell, Director Legal Services, Ministry of National Security, and Ms. Vera Prasad, Acting Chief Immigration Officer. Today we're going to address an issue upon which, completion of which we will take your questions. I will now hand you over to Ms. Laura Ramcharita, the Senior Immigration Officer in charge of enforcement.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. I'm going to give you a sequence of events leading up to the detention of the subject we are here to discuss today. Initially, she would have come to the attention of the Immigration Department on the 27th of March this year after being detained at a bar in Freeport, the Tequila Bar. She would have subsequently been detained at the heliport immigration station for the offense of illegal entry and not being in possession of any identity document. Subsequent to that, she was interviewed by an immigration officer with the assistance of an interpreter, where no trafficking indicators would have been exhibited. As such, she continued to be detained based on the fact that she would have allegedly entered the country and admitted to having entered the country illegally without the requisite passport or visa. She continued to be detained at the heliport immigration station until on the 4th of April, she was unaccounted for at the heliport immigration station. Inquiries began at that time, and the matter was referred to the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service. Sometime around the 6th of April, there was a social media post circulating that allegedly from her boyfriend stating that she would have made reports of being abused while in the heliport immigration station, and subsequent to that, she was removed from the facility. Based on that, the matter was referred to the Special Victims Department of the TTPS, and they started their inquiries. Further to that, the TTPS again engaged the young lady when she was detained by the Chaguanas police on the 26th of May. She was detained at a bar in the Chaguanas area and handed over to the Immigration Division. She was handed over to us and subsequently placed at the Immigration Detention Center and referred to the Counter-Trafficking Unit for screening. Subsequent to that, she was placed in the care and custody of the Counter-Trafficking Unit, where she remains at this time. Thank you.
I will now hand over to Superintendent Guy Allen, who will address you on the matter.
Good afternoon. My name is Claire Guy Allen. I'm a Superintendent of Police in charge of the Special Victims Department. Some time ago, our esteemed Commissioner of Police, Ms. Erla Christopher Harewood, would have instructed me to conduct investigation relative to misconducts and sexual exploitation at the immigration station in Chaguanas. I immediately formed a team from the Special Victims Department, and we proceeded to that location. Several persons were interviewed and certain information was disclosed. No sexual exploitation was disclosed at that location. Whilst at the location, we would have received information of the subject matter that we are speaking about today, that They were conducting a head count, and she was reported missing from the compound. She was later found by the Shogunas police and handed over to immigration and counter-trafficking units, where she's safe, and we are conducting an active investigation to get the facts and evidence. So if the allegations is true, and persons the allegations are made against would be brought to justice, and the law can take its process. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Guy Allen. I now hand over to Dr. Samantha Chaitram of the Counter-Trafficking Unit.
The young lady is in the protective care of the Counter-Trafficking Unit as we speak.
And we would now hand over to our legal person, Mr. Charles Peter Mitchell.
Good afternoon, everyone. I just wanted to clarify for the information of all members of the public who may be viewing that the Minister of National Security has in fact been named in certain High Court proceedings that are currently before the court. The Minister is aware, and by extension the Ministry of National Security is aware, that a particular order has been granted by the Honorable Court in relation to this matter. The Minister and the Ministry by extension would like to give all the assurances to the members of the public that there will be every intention to comply with all of the terms of the order of the court, and that the Ministry and the Minister by extension will do all that is required for this matter to be properly ventilated and fully ventilated before the court. Thank you.
Members of the media would now open the floor for any questions you may have.
Hi, good afternoon. Jassy Gonzalez at Trinidad Express. Ms. Claire Guy Allen, you said that you visited the immigration station at Chagaramas. Would you be able to say how many men, women, and children are housed at that facility, please? At the time of your visit, of course.
At the time of the visit, there were no children at that institution. There were 3 men and approximately 35 females. No children at that time.
And would you be able to say if are they being guarded exclusively by men or a mix of men and women? Coast Guard officers, I mean.
I would not, for security reasons, I would not like to disclose the security arrangements at that station.
And would you be able to say what's the immigration status of those detained at that facility? Would you be able to say?
Yes, I was advised that they were prohibited immigrants and they had no documentation allowing them to be in the country at the time.
Yeah, Superintendent Gallin, you said the phrase no sexual exploitation, no sexual exploitation was disclosed at that location. Does that mean that on the occasion that you went there, that nobody said things happened, or are you satisfied that no sexual exploitation has occurred at that place? There's a slight ambiguity in your words.
Okay. There were migrants at that location, and all of the migrants were interviewed, and no sexual exploitation was disclosed to the police at the time.
Did you, I mean, under those circumstances, were there any safeguards taken to ensure that they were able to speak freely? Because if they're guarded by persons, and now you're a new batch coming in, I mean, was it made aware to them that you're a different unit, and were they given privacy that they could speak freely without any fear of victimization? Any safeguards you could suggest?
Yes, we took a lot of safeguard. We were taken to a room at that station where the persons had the confidentiality to speak to us. There was an interpreter as well, and we interviewed those persons, and we assured them that here's what, we are law enforcement, and we are here for you, and we are asking you to give us any information that you may have of any misconduct or any criminal activity taking place at the premises.
Okay, in a media story today, headline media story, there are a couple of advocacy groups or individuals, activists, if you like, who are kind of piling in on the story, and we don't know what's what. But is there any formal arrangement for people in this situation to have an advocate, whether of their own choice, such as an activist or a particular group, or as a state sponsor, almost like an ombudsman for the migrants or something of that sort? Any thoughts along, to make sure that there is proper representation, that they understand the situation and that there's no intimidation, that there's some safeguard for their confidentiality? Any thoughts on that at all?
Well, persons, be it migrants or even local, you can have advocacy of your choice. And, you would be allowed, because it's a human rights issue, you would be allowed to have any advocacy of your choice to be present. One of the things, as you mentioned, the media, I'm in this business for a while now. And when you plaster these things on the front page of the media, the progress that law enforcement would have been obtaining, it sort of sends us back in a retrograde step. Especially, in this case, the migrant candidates may not be able to read the English. But whenever victims or survivors of sexual or physical exploitation see these things plastered in the media, it puts a very negative effect on the law enforcement investigation, and very little or nothing would be disclosed. We have to be more victim-centered whenever we are dealing with matters of this nature and this sensitivity.
My question also would be code of conduct for members of the protective services, because we can end up in a situation that is basically he said, she said, and who is to know what. But would yourself and other protective services be satisfied that there is a thoroughly, clearly understood, laid down code of behavior, especially when regard gender relations, so that for young men who may be full of life and blood pumping, but they're interacting with young females? Because I've actually just heard in my own personal life, speaking with colleagues, I have a media colleague who was very intimidated at something she went, a little girl about 21 years old. Some police officer had her feeling extremely uncomfortable. And then I have another friend who's an advocate against noise pollution. And she had said that if you call police, the police end up, you have to be careful that they don't end up tracking you. That there's some kind of, I don't know what it is. So that would be my question. Codes of conduct that is clearly laid down. We do live in a culture and so on, a particular certain free and easiness, but at the same time, this has to be clearly understood. For example, there's a thing called sexual harassment that different workplaces would be introducing, and some of them don't make joke. People can lose their job off of that. So I think that would be, anybody who wants to jump in can jump in on that, but I would direct it. Codes of conduct.
How I would answer that with codes of conduct. One of the things is that what we must remember is that we are all governed by the laws of Trinidad and Tobago, and each organization would have their own code of conduct or their own principles, policies that guide the way they conduct their business. Now, one of the things I heard you say, and I've heard it several times, the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service, we are not a perfect organization, but what I can rest assured is that persons who have information, persons who have criminality, persons who are sexually exploited, whether you are migrant or you're local, we are asking persons to come forward, make your report. You will be offered the necessary psychosocial support and all the services so that you can feel comfortable to be able to disclose exactly what is happening to you. You see, when we create an atmosphere where victims and survivors do not feel comfortable to come forward, we have these heinous crimes being perpetrated over and over again. So the media, every citizen, law enforcement, all hands must be on deck, and we must treat these things that are sensitive with the level of sensitivity, confidentiality, and respect that persons deserve, so that perpetrators, once these allegations are being made, let us be able to gather the evidence and be able to put these perpetrators behind bars. Yes? Did I answer your question?
Thank you very much, Ms. Guy Allen, and that will be the end of today's. We'll take one more question, and then we'll end this segment of the media engagement.
The ones who are at the heliport, are they awaiting deportation then? I'm asking.
I would ask the immigration personnel.
Persons currently detained at the heliports are being processed for repatriation.
Thank you, Mr. Gonzalez. And we have come to the end of this part of the media engagement. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much. Thank you, ladies. Thank you. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this press briefing. In this segment, we will be dealing with an incident which took place in the Trinidad and Tobago Defense Force over the last 24 hours. With me is Chief of Defense Staff, Air Vice Marshal Darrell Daniel, Lieutenant Colonel Singh, Acting Commanding Officer of the Trinidad and Tobago Regiment, and Deputy Commissioner of Police Investigations and Intelligence, Mr. Kurt Simon. I will now hand over to the Chief of Defense Staff, Air Vice Marshal Darrell Daniel.
Thank you very much, Ms. Archie. Good afternoon to the viewing public and listening public. Within the last 24 hours, something very disturbing happened in the Defense Force, which the details will be shared shortly. Rest assured that all efforts will be put in place to address this issue and be guided that the decisions, the recommendations, and the requests made by the Defense Force are in place to prevent such incidents from occurring. Lieutenant Colonel Singh, please enlighten the audience.
Good afternoon, members of the media, members of the viewing public. As indicated, I am Lieutenant Colonel Ashok Singh. I am the acting commanding officer of the Trinidad and Tobago Regiment, and I was alerted early this morning of a missing Galil assault rifle from the Support and Services Battalion, Tetran Barracks in Chaguaramas. At approximately 12:30 hours this morning, the orderly officer, who is the senior person on duty at Tetran Barracks, was alerted by a person who was on duty and would have been assigned a Galil assault rifle that his rifle was missing. The orderly officer immediately conducted the standard operating procedures or SOPs for such incidents and immediately confined Tetran Barracks. Tetran Barracks remains confined at this point in time as we continue the investigation. The orderly officer also conducted an immediate search of the location, started a preliminary investigation, and alerted her commanding officer. Earlier this morning, with the advent of more light, a thorough search was again conducted of the vicinity, but the Galil assault rifle was not found. We alerted the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service, Western Division in particular, of the incident, and they are currently at Tetran Barracks working alongside us in conducting this investigation. Additionally, we would have alerted the interagency task force with regards to the missing Galil assault rifle, and we are currently working alongside them in terms of gathering further intelligence and information with regards to the missing Galil assault rifle. The Trinidad and Tobago Regiment sees this as a very serious incident and will continue to work alongside the TTPS to diligently find this assault rifle, the Galil assault rifle, and bring the perpetrators to justice. Thank you.
Mr. Kurt Simon will address you now.
It's good day, good evening, Trinidad and Tobago. Indeed, my name is Kurt Simon, Deputy Commissioner, acting in charge of intelligence and investigations. I can indeed confirm that a report was made by the Trinidad and Tobago Defense Force to the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service through the Western Division of this report being mentioned. We are in fact involved in the investigations, and we are working closely with the TTDF on this issue. I can assure the public that the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service will not be leaving any stone unturned in this matter. We see it just as the Trinidad and Tobago Defense Force has expressed as a serious matter, and we are approaching it in such light. Our intelligence and investigative arms have been activated in response to this matter, and in fact, there is the considerations right now as to a reward to be disseminated for any information that would lead anywhere in between finding the perpetrator and the weapon or the weapon. We are going to work assiduously on this matter, and we want to encourage the public, anyone with information, feel free to share with the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service. You know our numbers. You call us, and you will be treated with strict confidentiality in the issue, in our resolve to bring this matter to some sort of closure. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Simon.
Ladies and gentlemen, in closing, I just want to remind the viewing public that the values that the Defense Force stand for will be enforced. Whether that means when decisions are made, recommendations or requests are made, it is all in the interest of ensuring our service personnel stand to the highest standards that we have been known for. And whatever decisions, recommendations or requests have to be made will ensure that the persons who wear this uniform that we wear live by those standards. And if they are found wanting, they will not be members of the Defense Force. And I know that is what you, the public, expect of us. That doesn't prevent people from exercising their rights based on constitutional or otherwise to challenge our stand for what we stand for and our standards. But rest assured, as the leader of this institution called the Defense Force, I and my command team will ensure that we hold ourselves firstly accountable to you, the public, and expect our men and women to conform to our values that we stand for. Thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen. I would now open the floor for any questions you all may have.
Good afternoon, Rhonda Dowlat, Guardian Media. Last month, I think, is it true that about 3 officers or members of the Defense Force was transferred from the presidential unit regarding some shooting up of a presidential vehicle? Is that matter under investigation, or any word on that? Any update with respect to the investigation?
There was an incident that, as you highlighted, that occurred at the president's compound is concerning one of his vehicles and is being investigated. And as I said before, we hold ourselves to a very high standard, and there are codes of conduct that we live by. And when you're found wanting, the relative regulations and the Defense Act will be applied to you.
With respect to the missing weapon, how soon or how effective you think would be the cooperation of the other members of Defense Force, and what is the maximum penalty for a member of the Defense Force to face in a situation like this?
I would not want to preempt such a question with the ongoing investigations. But the Defense Act is public knowledge, and all the information you ask is there depending on the outcome of the investigation and what is proven.
Hi, good afternoon. Jesse Gonzalez, Trinidad Express. Was the Galil, well, the allegedly stolen Galil, was it loaded?
No, it was not.
Okay.
There being no further questions,
there was this incident, this kind of recurring alleged incident of missing ammunition, like at these various crime scenes, that ammunition with certain markings of the protective services being found. And some commentator in some media house about a couple of weeks ago suggested that it was persons making their way onto the Defense Force ranges, collecting up spent shells, packing it full of gunpowder, getting the little firing caps and putting in new projectiles. Any comment on that? That was in the major newspapers, I don't know, about the past 10 to 14 days. Any comment on the missing, any updates on the missing rounds, efforts to get to the bottom of it, and also the scenario of persons making their way onto that, any feasibility of that, making their way and reassembling?
There wasn't any report of any missing wrongs being made either by the TTPS or the TTDF. So I just want to correct you on that, sir. Additionally, the comment that you are referring to, it is one made by the director of the Forensic Science Center. And the TTPS re-held discussions surrounding that issue about the possibility. It is just one of the theories, one of the hypotheses as to how these ammunition may be found with TTDF and TTPS demarcations upon them. It was just a hypothesis being exposed.
We'll take one more question from the floor. Thank you.
I was just going to ask a follow-up. I mean, is it not true that that markings were found on shell cases on certain crime scenes, the markings of the protective services were found? I mean, you may say that as regards your accounting that nothing has gone amiss, but there's also the scenario of a squaddie being given a certain number of rounds to let off, a soldier or a Coast Guardsman being given a number of rounds to let off, and nobody's counting the rounds. You're given a magazine to discharge, if it's, I don't know, 25 rounds, is it? Who's counting? So who's to stop anybody slipping something in their pocket? You know, I mean, these are, the question is, I wanted to get a response to the reports that even though you're happy with your accounting within the protective services of nothing officially reported missing, there are still unexplained questions that the allegation is that these marked shells are being found on crime scenes. Thank you.
I want to deal with your suggestion that wrongs are just given haphazardly to persons for them to expend. That, sir, is not the case. The military is very strict when it comes to wrongs on arms and ammunition, hence why we cannot count. I am suggesting that when the investigation is completed by the police, the questions that we have in our minds as to explain what we are experiencing would be brought to light. Until then, we will continue to conform to our rules and regulations and our guidelines and our standing orders, which has put us where we are today over the years. And rest assured, we do not take this lightly. Hence why we are here putting out to the public that a weapon has gone unaccounted for, and we will not leave any stone unturned until we find that weapon. And those who are responsible will be dealt with.
Thank you, sir. We'll take one last question.
Case for this year in terms of a weapon going missing, or how many for this year so far?
This is not something that happens or that we want to happen at all. Yes, this is the first case, and God's willing, the last one for the year. It's not something we expect to happen whatsoever. Service personnel, there's what I call the trust factor, because these are people who volunteered to serve their country. And yesterday, you would have seen a recruit graduation, and they would have given an oath, swearing allegiance to serve Trinidad and Tobago. And that means something. If you voluntarily join our organization and say you want to serve, we expect you to do that conforming to the rules and regulations. So the advent of a weapon going missing is not something that should occur. However, because we are coming from a society, there are challenges, and we will continue to address them and not stand for anything short of the standards we expect. Thank you.
Just clarity on one situation, please. Some members of the Defense Force who are being expelled from the service for one reason or the other, how effective is the TTDF in terms of reclaiming that uniform that was dispatched to that member?
Again, that is a SOP. When you are discharged, all items of uniform are returned to the unit by whatever means necessary to ensure that we don't have some of the questions you might be asking in your mind. So rest assured that is part of our SOP.
Ladies and gentlemen, we have come to the end of the press briefing. We thank you for your attendance, and please have a good afternoon.
yo, this is your boy Jazzy, and we inside Isaac 98.1 FM, The Promise. And watch me, I want you to join me from 3 to 6 on the afternoon drive. It's the afternoon pump. You, me,